I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
Fusebox.
Yeah, I'd say that pretty well sums it up, huh?
Sad to say, bro. Sad to say. Yeah, hey, what's Pollard always saying? We're getting fucking dumb.
Our society is getting dumber by the minute, yeah.
Yeah, that's the one, yeah. Pretty sure he's talking about Americans. Ugh, yeah. This is Fusebox number 264, Muzzle Velocity. And you? Well, what are you exactly?
Disillusioned? Afraid? Hopeless, perhaps. Resigned, maybe.
Possibly looking for an exit?
Oh, very possibly. But that, my sound optimizing friend, is a pangolin for another day. Hello, friends, and welcome in to another edition of Fusebox, this one entitled Muzzle Velocity, which will be explained and examined shortly. I'm your red, white, and very, very blue host, Mark Rose, and over there, as mentioned, is the czar of the bizarre and equally blue co-host, Mr. Milk Canes, everybody.
Yeah, as blue as a teenage boy's onions, amigo. Yeah, I gotta say, 2025 has been pretty damn depressing so far.
Indeed it has, Mr. Canes. Alas, we have the puff and buzzle at an historic rate currently. Threats to not only liberty and personal freedom, but to our allegedly secure personal information.
Yeah, the hell with all that. It's about cash and how we can grab it. Damn the law, full speed ahead.
There are growing pockets of resistance out there, as we might all imagine, and not so secretly are hoping to see more of.
Yeah, it's just too damn bad those pockets of resistance aren't coming from Congress.
Sadly.
Well, I gotta tell you, there might be half a dozen of these folks on the red aisle who actually make sense, but the vast majority just seem to be willing to roll over for King Trump. It's crazy.
Yeah, we were just chatting about this the other day. The idea that the Maganoids idea is to get everybody so exhausted with all the turmoil and stress of seeing their potential livelihoods stripped away, or worse, medical coverage yanked out from under them, that the populace gets just so fatigued they just, as you say, roll over and let the orange fascist get away with dismantling the federal government and installing a dictatorship. Well, newsflash, not gonna happen. We're already seeing the protests forming.
And the lawsuits filing.
Yeah, too many folks affected by this recent round of abuses, masquerading as budget cutting and fraud busting.
If they're looking for fraud, they should just start with themselves. Who the hell does this Musk guy really work for? Adolf Trump says he's just an advisor, but documents for Doge say Musk actually runs the show.
Yeah, Judge Chutkan was not amused by the duplicitous rationale there either when she made her ruling just a few days ago about the request for a temporary restraining order that was submitted by several states' attorneys general. She was calling them out to clearly, and I do mean clearly, identify the role this guy has, since there is more than a little confusion about that.
Yeah, there's no confusion. He's a liar. Plain and simple. He's just trying to avoid getting his ass booted out, and by making his actual role clear as mud.
Well, friends, in addition to an examination of our show's title, when we return, we'll have a couple of Hot Wire of Science segments for you, as well as a brand new Grindhouse Minute with our buddy 42nd Street Pete, this time on the really better than it should have been film, Creature from 1985. So, stay with us, aren't we?
Persistence of vision is the principle which makes movies possible.
A bloodthirsty homicidal killer. And he makes house calls. Dr. Butcher, MD.
You like that one, guys?
Zombies! Yay!
Oh, it's a classic. Zombie Holocaust. Or retitled as Dr. Butcher, MD, Medical Deviant. Oh, how did I learn about all this? Well, back in the day, through magazines. Famous Monsters, Castle of Frankenstein, things like that. Yeah, like the ones I have upstairs. But you know what? There's a new place to go for info about stuff like this and everything else in the Grindhouse world. Yes, there is, Milo. It's called Grindhouse Resurrection Magazine. And it's jam-packed with articles about these films. The folks who write for GRM, they lived it. And there's a piece in the premiere issue all about early zombie movies without a bite. You should check it out. There's a link in the show description to get your paws on a copy.
Grindhouse Resurrection! Yay!
The show for everybody, but not everybody will like it. TheFuseboxShow.com.
Back at you, friends. So let me shed a little blight on the title of this edition of the show, shall I?
Well, who's going to stop you?
Well, certainly not me. And why would I?
Why, indeed. Drone on, Padrone.
Friends, if you were around for the first tumultuous term of the Orange Guy, you may recall a political strategist that the aforementioned Orange One had enlisted to aid in his campaign, a chap named Steve Bannon. A rather cagey guy. And by cagey, I mean shifty, Trump mutt, and former co-founder of, quote, news site Breitbart, self-proclaimed alt-right. He lasted about 7 months as that executive strategist, and then...
before going to the Hooskow.
Well, it was a little later, but there was that con he tried to pull, funding the border wall with all those Maganoid funds, which...
he pocketed.
Yeah. And he copped to that one recently.
With no time served. Anywhere.
Same as it ever was with this bunch. Well, in an interview several years ago with PBS's Frontline, he made this rather haunting statement.
I said, all we have to do is flood the zone. Every day we hit them with 3 things. They'll bite on one and we'll get all of our stuff done. Bang, bang, bang. These guys will never be able to recover. But we got to start with muzzle velocity. So it's got to start and it's got to hammer. It's got muzzle velocity.
Ugh.
Yeah, and an apt description of exactly what we're seeing now, right out of Bannon's playbook. Keep generating these insane and lawless acts in hopes that the populace is so utterly overwhelmed that they just give up and succumb to the onslaught of madness.
Yeah. No.
Well, this is what we've got going for the foreseeable future, friends.
We gotta hope the courts step up here. They are really a nearly last line of defense.
Nearly?
Yeah. Well, Herr Trump ain't looking too damn healthy these days, and clearly he's inherited brain worms from RFK Jr.
The wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water.
Yeah. Well, there is that. Speaking of blood pressure...
The hot wire of science.
With all the shenanigans going on these days regarding threats to our lives and liberties, one might want to keep a watchful eye on blood pressure levels. Many folks are dealing with this condition, and it's something to take seriously, of course. And we can manage this condition through careful diet and exercise plans that actually have been proven to be effective.
I smell a butt.
I beg your pardon?
Well, I mean that figuratively, of course. Maybe.
Of course. Well, you're right. What if I told you that the blood pressure checks that occur in your doctor's office may be totally wrong?
I'd say, what else is new?
So, the current best practice is to take seated blood pressure readings with a detailed protocol. For instance, patients must not eat, drink, or exercise for 30 minutes prior. They must have an empty bladder and sit calmly for 5 minutes prior to the first reading. They must sit with their feet uncrossed and flat on the floor. Their back should be supported and, a big one that's often overlooked, they must keep the arm to be measured resting on a flat surface at the height of their heart, not higher or lower.
Wait, how does that reflect normal? I mean, no one is in that state throughout the day. What kind
Well,
of...
Mr. Keynes, a new study blows away quibbles over protocol and suggests that even when done perfectly, the method is second rate. We shouldn't be sitting at all when we take our blood pressure. We should be lying down.
Ooh, I'm in. Can I bring my teddy bear?
Well, let's see. Is it anatomically correct? Wait, never mind. I don't want to know. According to the study, published in JAMA Cardiology and led by researchers at Harvard, blood pressure readings measured while lying down were significantly better at indicating risks of cardiovascular disease, stroke, heart failure, and death than were seated blood pressure readings alone. For instance, people who had high blood pressure readings while lying down but not while seated had an estimated 53% higher relative risk of coronary heart disease than people with normal blood pressure. They had a 51% higher risk of heart failure, a 62% higher risk of stroke, a 78% higher risk of fatal coronary heart disease, and a 34% higher risk of all-cause mortality. So for people who had high blood pressure readings only when sitting, there was no statistically significant difference in risk of coronary heart disease, heart failure, or stroke compared to people with normal blood pressure. The only statistically significant differences were a 41% higher risk of fatal coronary heart disease compared to the 78% seen in those with high readings while lying down, and an 11% higher risk of all-cause mortality. So the people with the highest risks across the board were those who had high blood pressure readings while both sitting and lying down.
You think?
And lastly, friends, this somewhat local item, it occurred in Washington State.
Close enough for government work.
Yeah, well, close enough to us, yeah. Funny you say that, though, Mr. Keynes. I'll leave it there for a moment, but this news item became a national thing back in 1994 when in the small town of Oakville, Washington, it rained blobs.
Blobs, you say? So, did Steve McQueen come to rescue?
No, they weren't giant red blobs that devoured everything in their path. No siree blob. These were tiny, translucent gobs of goo that fell from the sky over a period of several days. Police officer David Lacey was driving his cruiser on patrol when he noticed it had begun to rain. Now, that's not unusual in Oakville, where apparently water drops could splatter there against windshields 275 days out of the year. But something about this storm seemed different. When Lacey turned his wipers on, he noticed the rain wasn't being swept aside. It seemed to smear as though someone had taken petroleum jelly and smudged it across the car.
Gee, this isn't right.
Lacey told a friend who was riding with him.
We're out in the middle of nowhere. Where did this come from?
When they pulled over at a gas station, Lacey donned gloves and felt the substance, which was goopy and viscous. Somehow, the skies over Oakville had opened and let loose a baffling mystery. Officer Lacey was perplexed, to say the least, but not concerned. At least not until he began to feel seriously ill.
Uh-oh. It didn't then mysteriously jump off the hood of the car and latch onto his face, causing him to mutate into a giant blob with tentacles. And a desire to vote Republican, did it? Did it?
Tell
me the truth. Really. I can take it. I think.
Lacey said he became very ill with fatigue and nausea. And then resident Beverly Roberts told the Chronicle that she grew curious enough about the goo to take some home for a closer look. Within a day, she said, she was struck by weird symptoms, including, are you ready? Including vertigo, and she had to seek medical care. Others reported upper respiratory infections and inner ear infections at roughly the same time the blobs appeared. Everybody in town came down with the flu, she said. Samples of the goo were collected by the Washington State Department of Health and the Department of Ecology. The Department of Health found 2 bacteria present in the samples. Whether the bacteria could cause illness in people was debated. However, before further studies could be undertaken, Health Department microbiologist Mike McDowell said the samples disappeared from his lab. And because the lab testing was largely inconclusive, other theories, of course, cropped up. One thought that jellyfish had somehow been swept up, destroyed, and then scattered, either through some kind of natural event or something man-made.
Nope, not that.
Local physician Dr. David Little theorized that the blobs were discharged waste from a plane that, he said, would explain both the white blood cells found in the samples and the fact that it sickened and killed animals, since planes use antifreeze in their lavatory systems. But the Federal Aviation Administration shot down any idea it could have come from aircraft, noting that the chemicals used would turn any waste blue.
Keep going.
Another posted that the Air Force, which was said to be performing bombing practice runs over the Pacific, had perhaps blown jellyfish clear out of the water and over Oakville. Or worse, that they were conducting biological weapons testing.
Bingo! You can stop right there. This is the perfect control group setting, bro. Small town, out of the way. It's how the giant Manus aliens will start their onslaught. Take over a small town, dress like locals. You know the drill.
So why are they dressed in leisure suits?
Well, they dig retro, dude.
While the Air Force did confirm bombing practice by the 354th Fighter Squadron,
aha!
It had taken place 40 to 50 miles away.
You're gonna believe the military?
Well, to this day, friends, there has never been a concrete answer for the blobs or their origin, and the event hasn't, in all these years, reoccurred.
Sure, they got what they needed. Folks got sick, mission accomplished. Next!
It's so simple in your world, isn't it? The only other clue came courtesy of Jim and Kathy Bellinger, who reported seeing dead crabs along the Washington coast around the time the blobs were reported. A clear gel was nearby. Both Kathy and her dog touched the goo, and oddly enough, both became ill the following day. It's weird, Kathy said.
And there is something strange to be sorted out down there.
And speaking of mysterious creatures falling out of the skies...
What? We're back to Congress again?
No, something that actually works. Another fun-filled episode with our buddy 42nd Street Pete as he takes a goose and a gander at a relic from Roger Corman's 1985 film, Creature.
In the near future, in the shadow of Saturn's rings,
Stranded beneath the surface of the barren moon called Titan, scientists find the one thing they never expected.
Is anybody here?
Was expecting them.
Oh my God!
And suddenly, those who had traveled across the galaxy had run out of space. Creature.
We found someone's collection of life from all over the galaxy, like a child's butterfly collection. Only some of these butterflies are not so friendly.
And now it's time for another Grindhouse Minute with 42nd Street Pete.
Okay, let's go back to another Grindhouse moment from 1985, a film called Creature, which of course was an Alien ripoff, and one of the better Alien ripoffs because basically had a lot of really fucked up shit in it, including Klaus Kinski. And it's like these two competing corporations land on this planet. I think they describe it as somebody's insect collection, a cosmic insect collection. Well, one of the insects gets out and it's pretty hungry. And when it kills people, it not only eats them, but it sticks this like bug in their head to reanimate them to bring other people to get killed. And that's the whole premise of the whole thing, this creature getting served dinner. And there's some real show-stopping shit in there, like a complete exploding head, some decapitations, and some really cool spaceship stuff. Bill Malone was the director who had previously done the Monster in the Sewer films, Scared to Death. And he's done some other stuff too. But this one sort of really kicks ass because Kinski's completely out of his mind as usual and winds up dead and walking around with one of these bugs stuck to the back of his head. Definitely worth a look. Creature from 1985. That's our Grindhouse Minute for today.
This has been another Grindhouse Minute with 42nd Street Pete.
Oh, let me just say, that really, this was a lot better than it should have been. They had a little more money, too, for this one. Pete's so right about Kinski. He's off the grid.
Pretty much always off the grid, wasn't he?
Safe to say.
He sure had the creep factor down, man. Now, his daughter, Natasha, she's the opposite.
I know, but you know what? She can turn it on, too. Believe me, buddy. I think it's in their DNA. Next time, Pete is back with one of the most famous biker films of all time. One that put American independent pictures in the perpetual Grindhouse limelight for all time. 1969's Satan's Sadists. You won't want to miss that one.
Yeah, you better stick around, or we'll make you ride, bitch, on our electric glide.
And with that, we'll call it a show, friends, but of course, not before thanking our contributors to this edition of Fusebox, 42nd Street Pete and Jeff Pollard. Thanks, as always, to the crusty but benign Baron of Bi-Amplification, Milt Keynes, for production assistance and co-hostery.
A pleasure as always. And you know what would be an even bigger pleasure?
Orange Guy and his MAGA minions crawl back under the rocks from whence they came, never to be seen or heard from again?
Close. No, actually, that is better. But coming in a close second is joining the smart folks who have become Patreon members and help to support whatever the hell it is we do here.
Easy to do. Just go to patreon.com/The Fusebox Show and join the expectorant crowd growing now. You'll get free Fusebox Swag, early show releases, and exclusive content as well. Yes, but also a shout out to Grindhouse Resurrection Magazine for their continued support. Please, folks, visit 42ndstreetpete.net. Find out more. Thanks, most importantly, friends, to you for pushing play on this audio amusement. I have been your sitting pretty in a real ugly chair host, Mark Rose, saying until our next cartoon.